Stop reviewing me. Let's talk about The Running Man.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So, today we're going to be discussing or debating The Running Man. But before we get into that, you already know what time it is movie recommendation time. So, I think I should start this off real quick. I'm going to recommend a Swedish film called, I believe it's called The Unthinkable. Yes, it's The Unthinkable. It's actually on Amazon Prime. I downloaded this not too long ago. Once I saw the trailer, it was my kind of thing. Is post-apocalyptic in a way. There's a mysterious attack happening in Sweden, and then a pianist, returns back home and pretty much confronts his past. It's surprisingly like the first half of the film is surprisingly drama based. So that's why I think Daniel, you might like this one. I would recommend you to go watch this one. You haven't seen this one. It links into trauma and then it falls into the whole, post-apocalyptic, not end of the world, but just like I said, Sweden going under, a mysterious attack, and they end up going into a state of emergency. And yeah, I haven't finished it by the way. I think I'm 3/4 of the way there, so that's why I can't really speak on it too much. But so far, it was really good.
Is it like a sci-fi thing or horror or straight drama?
I can't even say fully sci-fi. It's more so the government, whoever they're beefing with, the government have developed a technology that makes things that's happening in Sweden uncontrollable. Like there's scenes where cars are running into each other, and then when people step out, it's like I don't know. It's like they've been maybe I don't know if it's brainwashed or they're just not themselves. So it's very hard to explain. But so I'd say it's a mixture of sci-fi and very drama based because obviously like I said, the first half of the film it links to pretty much family trauma, especially with the main actor who is a pianist. And then you'll see the first half of what he was like as a teenager, and then obviously you see how he's growing up, and you'll see and then the development of his character, and then when he goes back home to confront his demons in a way. Yeah, to confront his demons because unfortunately actually no, let me not even say what I was about to say, that's a spoiler, but he has to go back to his hometown for a reason, but then that forces him to confront his demons. That's why I say it's a good blend of, in a way, a heartfelt drama mixed with sci-fi action. There's no aliens. So far, I don't see no aliens.
Yeah, sci-fi doesn't require aliens, right? If,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
it's
yeah.
if there's any kind of fictional technology, I think I would count that as sci-fi. But yeah, I might check that out. All right, so the best thing I watched this week is Cooties, which is a 2014 zombie comedy set in a primary school. So the story follows a guy who is kind of this struggling writer who really wants to be a novelist, and he's not quite getting there, and so he pays the bills by being a substitute teacher in a primary school in his hometown. And due to tainted chicken nuggets, a zombie apocalypse breaks out in the school, and the teachers, who for the most part don't really get along, have to kind of band together to survive the uprising of the zombie first graders. And it's a quite flawed movie, but it kind of deals with kind of this whole idea of teachers kind of being underappreciated and kind of being kind of besieged from all sides. Like the students make their lives difficult, their colleagues make their lives harder, the parents aren't helping, and that kind of if you are a teacher or if you know teachers, you will have heard this idea that like nobody appreciates you and everybody's working against you. And this is made literal when the students turn into flesh-eating zombies. And it's very funny, it's very witty, it's very quotable. It's just one of those movies that succeeds despite its flaws because it has an idea and then it realizes that idea. And that is enough to carry the movie, even if some parts of it are a little bit more mixed. The cast is like a who's who of comedy C-listers and B-listers from 10 years ago. If you were watching sitcoms from that time, you were recognizing most of the cast in one way or another. And it's just a group of eccentric characters being put into a survival situation. And a big part of the joke is just how, like we've talked about in the past, how movies will never show harm to children. And this movie just says, "Hold my beer," and it just says, "Yeah, just we're gonna take some baseball bats to these kids, and it's gonna be funny. You're gonna like it, and you're gonna feel awful for liking it." And I didn't feel awful. I just had a good time with it. It's just fun.
I'm sure this is many teachers' good, guilty pleasures.
Yeah, I have teachers in my family, and I want to show them this movie now because it's gonna resonate.
I definitely want to check that out as well. Okay, cool. It's time for the main event of The Running Man. Daniel, may you please do your thing?
So, The Running Man is a dystopian action thriller movie which is set in the distant future of 2025, in which the world is kind of generally run down. There's widespread poverty and joblessness and rampant disease and massive inequality. And the story follows this man whose child has pneumonia. And in order to afford a doctor, he signs up as a contestant at the network, which is this TV network that is kind of all encompassing, and they have these grotesque games where people humiliate themselves and get injured for not very much money, but it's the best they can do because there's just no jobs. And so he kind of gets railroaded into volunteering for The Running Man, which is a game show in which he and other contestants are on the run, and they get paid for every day they survive. And if they can evade both the hunters that work for the network as well as the public that gets prize money for ratting him out, he will get a massive payday that will make him one of the richest people in the world, and it would solve all his problems. And then the story kind of unfolds from there as he tries to survive the game. So, what did we think of The Running Man?
I like this film, and I'm a bit disappointed that it flopped in the box office sales, and a bit confused as well. Of course, it wasn't perfect. There definitely are issues that we're going to get into, but I thought the main character's motivation was packaged solidly with what it came with afterwards. I thought the game's rules were cool. I liked the media manipulations that we'll see in the film. I also liked the class warfare because that the theme of class warfare because it wasn't too in your face. It came at subtle moments, and they used it as a vehicle in the final, especially in the final act, which was a pretty good final act. Not the greatest, but it was pretty good. So overall, I had a good time with this film. It was fun, and I liked and it was based in London too. A lot of people don't know that. They'll see many scenes that were in Wembley, so I was like, oh, okay. It didn't have much of a significance, but it was when you're from somewhere and you see certain scenes from where you're from. It's like, oh, okay. It's like, oh, that's pretty cool. But like I said, the aesthetic didn't really do much. It didn't really do much for my experience. It didn't make it better or worse, but it was just cool to see. But overall, I had a good time. It was a fun movie. A bit still kind of shocked why it flopped so bad, but yeah.
Yeah, so I had very mixed expectations going into this. On the one hand, Edgar Wright really knows how to make a movie. Like the guy just shoots stuff in fun ways and does creative things with like the camera and whatever. And I think he's kind of been a little bit under criticism because he just peaked 20 years ago with like Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead. But this is still good. Like I could still see that a competent director was making this, and it just made it fun to watch. Like the baseline enjoyment of it like really comes from how scenes are framed and how the camera moves and how it's paced. I actually had kind of a problem where about 90 minutes into it I needed a bathroom break, so I was waiting for a lull in the action, and it just never came. Like there was no opportunity to just step out for 3 minutes, because there was every time I thought, okay, surely now it's gonna be a little bit slower for the next 5 minutes. No, something happened, like somebody got shot or something exploded. So I'm just saying, like pacing wise and just the way it's shot, just as a viewing experience, this is quite good. One of the better ones this year. Not the best, but up there in the upper third or something. And I also like Glen Powell a little bit more than most people. I think there's a little bit of Powell fatigue because he's been in so much in the last few years. But I just think he's charismatic, and even if he's not maybe the greatest actor ever, I'm never sorry I watched him. You know what I mean? The guy's just likable.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
and so
Hitman
like
too.
those were all ingredients for why, like, this was the plus side, right? And then on the negative side, I'm so tired of lazy social commentary. We've gone over this many times in previous episodes. I just want it to actually say something. I want it to reflect what's actually going on in the world. I want it to be insightful and contribute to people's understanding of the world or some topic or something, right? And almost no dystopian science fiction does that, because it's like this soup of cliches and not very motivated and whatever. And we've gone over that many times. And this one is mostly that. It's like 90% of it is just cliches. And I'm actually this movie got me to read the book, and I'm mostly through with that now, and that's actually quite good. But it's also just a collection of bad things, right? Just every problem you can imagine that a future world might have, this world has it. And there's no, like, one of the big flaws I see with this movie is that there isn't really a big thesis on what went wrong. A lot of dystopian science fiction is about, okay, what if we don't get pollution under control, or what if World War III happens, or what if the nukes get out, or whatever, right? Or what if the economy melts down, or what if AI takes over everything? You know what I mean? It's This movie is missing that completely, and that kind of just makes it a little bit flimsy, because I never really understood why things had gotten so bad, right? And there's just throughout the movie, there's just thing after thing where things are just as bad as you could possibly imagine them. And I think that is something that makes the movie not hang together as well as it could. But on the other hand, you have this, like, I think this really sells the desperation of its main character and of what you will do to help the people you care about, and about how it's going to kill you. In that way, it reminded me of Moon from 2009, where a guy literally works himself to death in order to provide for his family and for humanity in general. And this was a little bit like this, where this is happening very clearly, like from the protagonist's point of view. It's very clearly happening because this is how he can earn the money to save his child, and he's not doing it for greed. He's not doing it to make a point, or out of conviction. He's doing it because he's got bills to pay, and that aspect of it, I think, really works. And his perspective, his point of view, and his mindset about how he puts up with all this crap, knowing that the longer he holds out and the better he plays the game, the nicer a life his child will have. That part, I think, quite works. What doesn't work so well is the ending, which I think is very overstuffed and very confused and very, very abrupt, and doesn't really, I didn't think really worked or was a good conclusion to that whole story. So it is very much a mixed bag, but overall, it's a solid movie, I think. And I enjoyed my time with it more than I didn't.
Okay. Well, let's kind of get into the plot mechanics. So the game's rules beyond the hunters. How do you think the film kind of like utilizes the concept of citizen bounty hunting and record and report app? Yeah, especially the record and report app, which is pretty cool. Kind of like to make because it kind of felt like it made the whole like the entire country feel like an arena. So that's something which I enjoyed about that concept. How did you feel about that?
Yeah, the entire thing is geared towards class warfare, right? Like this whole idea of there's a majority, not in terms of numbers, but in terms of society is geared to entertain like a small elite, right? Like a relatively small, like they live in these high rises, in these gated communities, and everybody else lives in the slums, and everything is geared towards entertaining the elite. And the entire show, the way it's done, is geared towards making them complicit in the oppression of the masses, right? And they do it through bribes, and they do it through entertainment, and they do it by bringing out the worst in them by appealing to their baser impulses. And every part of the game is geared towards making that happen. And I think that part worked quite well.
Hmm. I think it really worked well because even though there was class warfare going on, it didn't really feel like anyone was segregated because they were all taking part of it. We saw, a taxi driver abusing his power. Like I could remember in the scene where Richards got into the cab when the game just started, and then he was like, he was in a way showing that he had power over him by saying, "Listen, I could report you, but I won't. All you need to do is this, right?" And then obviously there was another encounter. Like anyone, pretty much anyone, higher class, lower class, everyone had the power. So it felt like they were, even though there was clearly like a divide between the rich and the poor, they all still, what's the word I'm trying, still kind of like the game made them feel like made them feel as one, which is kind of weird to say because obviously
Yeah.
the have-nots are the ones that are more affected by this game, but at the same time, the have-nots and the haves are both in a way working together unintentionally because the running man brings them all together.
Yeah, and that actually reminded me, and this is going to be a heavy comparison, but in the American South during the slavery era, the social contract was that if you were a white man, no matter how bad your life was, you were still better than the black population. No matter how much life put you down, how much you struggled, how poor you were, there was always a class of people worse off than you and worth less in terms of how the society worked, right? And
Hmm.
that was a big part for why that system had so much support, because psychologically it feels really bad to be at the bottom, and psychologically it feels really good to know that somebody else is worse off than you, even if you're not a bad person. Even like, you know what I mean, like it's this, just the knowledge that somebody has it worse than you. That is what this network is selling. right?
Mm.
And and this works on multiple levels, right? So if you are part of the elite living in the shiny high rises, you can look down on the people in the slums. And if you are living in the slums, you can look down on the contestants. And the contestants can't look down on anybody because they're at the bottom, but they have no voice, right? Because the network completely controls what the rest of society sees of them and what they can even say, right? And so, and everybody is incentivized to keep this going because it means there's somebody worse off than them. And
Yeah.
as long as that's the case, the system keeps working.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Goddamn. You took it from 0 to 100. That's a very good point. All
It's
right.
what we do around here. No, but actually, like this is why that works, right? Like this
Mm.
is why this kind of dynamic works, and this is how a lot of dictatorships work, by designating somebody else as not just the enemy but just as less than everybody else. And everybody who is in the club, who is on this side of the line, is therefore better than average or better than somebody else. You know what I mean? Like that's really a huge part of this. And it's not just a calculation of, oh, how much money will I make for submitting a tip or whatever that leads to like a sighting of the runners. It's also, I feel good because I get to punch down on somebody.
Yeah.
And one thing the network is really, really good at is bring out the worst in people. And this is scattered throughout the entire movie, right?
Mm.
There's a scene where they've gone through all these trials, which are extremely degrading. You go through this day-long exercise of just being studied and prodded and just treated like cattle, right? And then you make it to the end, and that means you can already punch down. You're already, if you made it to the end, you're already better than the 90% who didn't, right? The people who kind of couldn't take it, or who didn't make the cut, or who were too sick or whatever, you're already better than them, right? And then there's a scene in which they are in the waiting room where they're waiting for Killian, right? And Killian essentially is there, basically just gets them to sign the contract, right? And the three finalists are invited in, and at that point they still have solidarity, right? They're all like screw the system, and we're in this together. And then it takes Killian about 2 minutes each to turn them, and they come out with like a glass of champagne and a beautiful woman, around their arm, and whatever. That's all it took to corrupt them. And
Mm.
it works on everybody except Richards,
Mm.
right?
Well,
And that's one of the key points here, that the network is extremely good at bringing out the animal in everybody, and that's how they control people.
yeah, I definitely do think they were. Yeah, they were good at definitely like kind of like just finding a way to, well, mainly with Richard's character, but the way that he descended into desperation, it was cool because it was like, because we already knew from the audience what Richard was given, that obviously women and, well, I wouldn't say money, but obviously what influence obviously his teammates wasn't going to be something that would have influenced him as well. So it was kind of, it was good how they found a way to, because all of them were desperate, but with Richards it was good to see what they did to, put him at a point where he's desperate and he's willing to sign. And also I think you mentioned you were, well, you were talking about how they were really good at manipulation, right? And that was something that I was going to talk to as well, because that's something which I enjoyed seeing. Even though it's things that we've seen before, it's just that the way that it was done here was just a good touch to the film when they were using deepfakes and AI generated propaganda. What were your thoughts when they were utilizing this?
I was going to bring up this idea that a lot of the social commentary in this is quite dated because the novel is from the 80s. And this whole idea of the network does not really work anymore, right? This idea that this is one show that everybody watches and that can control the cultural narrative and the perceptions of everybody does not exist anymore, right? And social media is completely absent from this. Like at no point does it play any kind of factor. So that makes the movie a huge anachronism in that way. But one thing that it adds compared to the original is that, like you mentioned, this whole thing about AI and AI fakes, where they can just manufacture video. Like once they have a bunch of footage of Richards, they can make him say anything on video. That is not something that was in the 1980s novel. In the 1980s novel, he just gets muted, and basically when he starts blowing the whistle on the pollution. And I don't remember if it was in the movie, but in the book there's this whole thing about that one activist that makes the videos. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of social media, right? But like in terms of how the network works and how public opinion works, social media is not a factor. And in the book, that guy work breaks down how you can make a breathing mask for $6, but they cost 500 in the shops. That is why his sister has lung cancer at age 5, and that is why everybody is dying from asthma, which is really cancer from the radioactive pollution and all of that, right? So,
Right.
like in the book, he blows the whistle on this in one of his videos, and they just mute him. And here they can just outright fabric, like in the movie, they can outright fabricate the entire video, and that kind of puts him completely removed from complete like reality. Like they don't even have to make him cooperate, right? Because they can make just generate video of him to say anything. And it
Yeah.
means they can make him look like the worst person ever, and it takes no effort at all. And Richards even remarks on it once, where it takes him like 2 minutes to generate this. And he says, "Oh, that was fast. Like I knew you could do this, but I didn't know you could do this in 2 minutes." It's
Mm.
like even surprises him. But that is like one of the things in which like what that this idea that like we live in this era now where you the fact that it's on video does not mean anything. Like I treat everything on the internet as a fable now, where if it's important that it's true, I double and triple check
Yeah.
and everything, like try to find sources and try, okay, where did this come from, and what's the agenda of the person who's telling me this, what do they want me to believe or feel. And once you put that filter into place, you are you're constantly under attack from all sides, right?
Mm.
Because so like even if it's true, even if the video is true, like the way it's cut and the way it's selected is already a choice that's geared towards manipulating you. And with AI, it doesn't even need to be real. Like it doesn't even need to be put out of context. Like you can just make it,
Mm.
right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like that is something that is very much in our lives. And I think this is one of those things. Like I think that kind of social media use will be viewed like asbestos wallpaper in 50 years. Right? If you go back 100 years, people used to put asbestos in their wallpaper or arsenic in their wallpaper. You know about arsenic wallpaper?
Nah.
It was the cheapest way to make wallpaper green, like in the 1910s or something. And that meant that poor people could have nice rooms because now they could afford wallpaper, which sounds stupid to us, but it's a real benefit. It's a real advantage. Like when somebody made cheap green wallpaper, that made millions of people's lives better because they didn't have to sit in a gray box all day. They could have color in on their walls.
Mm.
Problem is, if you breathe in arsenic for 10 years or 20 years, it would kill you. And people wouldn't know why people were dying. But my point here is something that looks stupid with in hindsight can have very good reasons for existing in the moment. And I think the way we use social media today will be one of those things where 20, 30, 50 years from now, it will be obvious that just marinating in propaganda all day is just a bad idea. And at some point, probably there will be a way to figure this out. And the point of me saying all of this is actually an issue that happens today, that is actually relevant to today. And even just showing up in a movie is valuable in that way. Because just a month ago, we talked about Tron Ares, and that movie pretended to be about AI when it wasn't. It's just outright not about AI, and it has nothing
Mm.
to do with how AI is impacting our lives. In this, even though it's a small part of the movie, this is actually dealing with how AI impacts our lives. And I gave it credit for that. Another area where it did that was where it talked about brain rot, where when Richards takes refuge with the anarchist, right? And his mom is just watching Freevee all day. And he says about how, oh, like she used to be a really thoughtful and caring person. And now her brain is just melted. She barely knows we're here because all she hears is the TV telling her who to hate. There's a few people in the world today who have seen that happen with their parents. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I never. Funny enough, I never actually saw it like that, but I do now that you say it. Yeah, I've never seen it firsthand. Actually, no, that's a lie. That is a lie. No, that is very true. I take that back. Yeah, it's that's the thing about this film. Sorry, I'm gonna quickly revert. I'm gonna revert back to this point that you just said, but going back to the whole TikTok thing, I wanted to mention sorry, the whole AI generated propaganda that resonated more with me because obviously I'm on TikTok here and there, and I see people's reaction to when they're making fake AI videos of them like saying crazy stuff and their reaction to it. So that's why when I was watching the Running Man, I was like, this should have been like a highlight moment for many people in the audience, and that's why I'm a bit confused why a film like this isn't bigger than what it actually is, because there were things that we're seeing. I'm like, this is fun to watch. This is what's like stuff like this is, like I say, it wasn't too in your face, but it's happening. So I don't see how you can't get joy from that.
So I think part of it is that it's a very small part of the movie. This is not what the movie's about. And I think it absolutely should have been, because I kind of mentioned this earlier, but a lot of its social commentary about the game shows is just out of date, because we had this 20 years ago. Like,
Mm,
to the novel's credit, it predicted reality TV of the 2000s in the 80s. But that was 20 years ago. Like these talent shows that are basically just excuses to denigrate people. Like, and I think I watched like an episode of American Idol or like something like this, right? Like once, and that just celebrated cruelty. And there was other stuff too, like which celebrity chef is it? Is it Gordon
um,
Ramsay?
Golden Rat Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah, his entire brand is being an asshole to people who are trying to get better, right? Like for about a decade, that was TV and that was the culture. And you were not just punching down, but just wallowing in the
Mm,
cruelty. And that kind of has gone away and it's been replaced with something else. And that something else is social media, where the problems I think are very different. But as I was watching the movie, like the bulk of it is this whole thing about you've got a monoculture where everybody watches freebie, and whoever decides what goes on TV determines what people believe. And that is kind of not really how it is today, at least for most people. Like that still exists, right? There are people who watch like certain TV stations or news stations or whatever. And I'm not just using euphemisms here, right? It's not just one, right? But they've been their entire personality has been taken over by what they're watching, because they're watching it for hours a day, and like that still exists, right? But that is not, I think, the big problem in our society at the moment. The big problem in our society is that social media means that everybody lives in their own bubble, and the algorithm creates a reality that is designed to get you to react to it by generating engagement, and that creates ad revenue and all of that, right? Like that's how that works. And two people can have completely different algorithms, or their algorithm can be trained to present them completely different realities. And that means that there is no common experience for people anymore, right? Like the more you live on social media, the worse this is. And it seems to me like this is like the real problem. And not simply because like a particular point of view that I disagree with is popular or whatever, but simply because people are insulated from facts and they're just being manipulated, and they're celebrating it in the same way that the people watching freebie are celebrating being manipulated, right? Like
mm,
they want to be outraged, they want to be offended, they want to hate somebody, and freebie gives them somebody to hate.
mm,
And like so it's kind of a mixed bag. Like it does speak to something, but by making it a TV station, I think it weakens it because it feels old. And I think a lot of people are going to look at this and say, well, this is not me, this is my parents, or this is my grandparents, or whatever, right?
mm,
Or this is somebody else, somebody I don't like. But I'm better than them because I get my information from trusted sources on TikTok, which
mm.
is almost worse. It's kind of a tie. But point is, like, I'm not just here to lecture people about, to put down the phone or whatever, right? Like, but it's like this is a thing that is happening in our society right now, and science fiction should speak to that. It should comment on it. And when Elton, right, the anarchist, looks at his mom, and she's basically dead to him because he's not been able to talk to her for years, because all she does is get outraged by what's on freebie. And as far as he is concerned, he's mourning his mom because he cannot talk to her anymore. That is a real tragedy, but it's like a line. It lasts like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And to go back to your original question, why is this not a bigger deal? It's because you will not get this from the trailer. The trailer does not show that this is what the story is about,
That's very
even
true.
if it even is about that. And also the stuff that is very specifically relevant to today, as opposed to kind of partially updating the dystopian vision from 40 years ago, right? Because that is kind of when TV was the thing that influenced people. You will not get that from the trailer or from the concept, and in part because reality TV is not as much of a thing anymore, and people kind of embarrassing themselves for prize money is something that it's not huge today. And then also it's a small part of the movie. The one thing they should have done is to really update the story to keep kind of the essence of it, which is people do denigrate themselves today for views on YouTube and TikTok, right? They will actually harm themselves, or they will embarrass themselves, or whatever else, right? Like just for the sake of views, because that is the currency by which you get success. And there are many people out there whose career plan is keep making content until you make it big, and then milk that for as long as you can. And that's the Hawk Tour girl. Do you know that one?
No.
So like the context in which this is, like she became famous is kind of
Oh
it's
no. Oh yeah, no. I heard. I know her. Sorry. I do know her. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Her too. Yeah.
So she was basically interviewed by somebody, and she had a very colorful way of putting a point across, and that made her famous for 15 minutes. And she milked that for all of those 15 minutes, and now it's basically over. But she launched like a cryptocurrency, and she went on, so like her social media blew up for a few months, and she probably made millions in that. And I would be really curious how much of that has did stick, because that is enough to really be set for life, right? And there are many people now whose career plan is that. Just try to strike it big. It's like playing the lottery kind of thing. But in order to do it, you have to kind of get more attention than everybody else, and you have to stand out. And even if it only lasts for a while, that is how you can make enough money to have a better life, right? That is kind of the equivalent of signing up for, that game, like that game where you're on a treadmill. Like people with heart conditions are put on a treadmill, and they have to answer trivia questions. And if they have a heart attack, they lose. Like basically they're pushed until they have a heart attack. But it's kind of the same thing. But I think the movie doesn't make this point very well. And if you want to make the movie relevant for today, if you want to update it, that is what they should have done. It should have been. I don't know how you would do it, because then you don't have a clear villain. The network is a very monolithic and very imposing and very powerful villain. And the tragedy with people who do this on social media is that they're doing it to themselves. You know what I mean? Like it's not quite the same thing. And so it would have changed the story, but maybe that is how you should have. Like if you are interested in actually making a meaningful statement, I think that they could have updated the story with the social media angle to make it more prominent and to make it more obvious. Because I do think a lot of people are going to miss this. Like they're going to watch it and they're going to say, oh yeah, this is about people who watch Fox News and who still watch TV, but I'm better because, I'm on TikTok.
Okay.
I think that is kind of almost like a downside of the movie, where I think a lot of people are not going to make the connection.
No. I think it's good to now lead into the ending, because you said you didn't really like that. You didn't really like the ending. So I was going to ask. So with obviously Richard surviving the plane crash, which leads to a revolt, you didn't enjoy that? Even with the events that took place before on the plane, obviously where everything that was going on, you didn't like that whole sequence.
I mean, the sequence is fine. Like it's not like it's poorly shot, but it's more like the network has this near perfect control over society and over people's minds, right? But at the same time, there's a lot of solidarity going along, right? Like wherever Richards goes, he finds people who see through the lies and who see through the propaganda and who are trying to make it, right? So the wife, what's her name? Sheila, right? Like Sheila asks him to not watch Freebie because she knows how awful it is, and he agrees. Molly sees through the propaganda. The anarchist, I can't find his name right now, but like this family with a sick child, where he finds some shelter and who smuggle him out of. Is it out of Boston? I think, like out of the city at any rate. Like
Yeah.
wherever he goes, there are people who see it the way Richards does. They're just silent. They don't have a voice. And what Richards is doing is he's giving them a voice, and he's giving them somebody to rally around. And I think the reason why I don't like the ending is that at one point he says in one of his videos, just turn it off, just stop watching. They can't make you watch. Yeah, they even say about how it's still legal to turn off the TVs, even though the TVs have cameras in them that observe who is watching. But the government has not taken the step yet where they are making you watch. And so the tragedy of all of this is that people are volunteering to be brainwashed. But the remote is right there. They can just turn it off, which is similar to social media. You can just walk away. You can just stop listening to the outrage merchants, right? And it's not that hard. You just have to take the step. And I feel like that should have been the ending. That should have been the step, the point where Richards wins, because he shows that you can defy the system and you can win, and you don't even have to do it like him. You can just walk away. You can just stop watching. You can just stop taking the bait. And it just turning into like an anarchist uprising, like in the studio. To me, that felt like a studio mandate where they said, "Hey, your ending is too brainy. People will find it boring and not get it. So can you put a riot in the studio where they kill Bobby T?" Right,
Mm.
because like they storm. I don't remember. I don't think he gets killed, right? But I think he flees because the angry crowd is
Yeah,
just
yeah,
an
he
open
flees.
rebellion, right?
Yeah.
And wouldn't it have been cooler if we saw like a bunch of characters who we had seen throughout the movie, and they see what happens to Richards, and then they turn off the TV and they go outside and they touch grass, and then the last shot is Bobby T talking before an empty studio and nobody's watching. Isn't that a
That
better ending?
no, that is definitely a better ending for them to switch off the TVs. In terms of what there had to be some sort of resolution when it comes to not even some sort, there had to be a resolution when it comes to obviously the mystery behind if his wife and child did die, but that could have been incorporated in that ending. So I do agree with you, that would have been a better ending.
Yeah, you could have still done that, right? But like this whole idea of we are simply going to stop listening to you and you can't make us. This is not 1984, right? This is not like the government is so in total control of people's thoughts that they can control what you think and even the like and even how you think. This is purely self-inflicted, and they're doing it purely because like reality is just too painful.
Mm.
Like because pollution and poverty and joblessness and lack of opportunities and all of that, it's just so much easier to turn on the TV and hate somebody. And even if you're well off, that's what everybody does. Like every single form of entertainment is based around satisfying some basic urge, right? Like the need to hate somebody, the need for purpose, the need to feel better than somebody, all of it, right? Or like when one of the contestants, who is it? Like one of the two contestants basically just spends all her money in strip clubs. She's not been able to have any meaning in her life. And now she's going to go out with a flash, right? And she
Mm.
knows it's going to get her killed because she's not hiding very well. And she's not stupid, right? But this is like it's a little bit like when somebody like there's this like people who have always had money or like who are financially comfortable will often shake their heads at what poor people do with money. And at some point you might realize that being poor means constantly being deprived, right? And it means things never get better. And so when you do have money, many people would rather waste it on a few good days than improve their lives at all, even if it's financially smarter to use that money for something else, like to save it, right? In case of an emergency. But a lot of people will not do this. And this is kind of what this contestant does, right? She knows it's bad for her. It's going to keep her from winning the game, but she's going to have a really good week. And that is she would not have had that other in any other way.
Yeah.
So like the entire system is predicated towards people wanting not just like instant gratification gets a bad rap, but if you go your entire life without it, that's really bleak. And that is the lives that most of these people are living in. And even if people have a good job, even if they are rich, they still have a pretty bleak life because the only difference between them and the poor person is that they have more expensive distractions. Like they do get like the medicine and all of that, right? So that shouldn't be underestimated. But in terms of their daily lives, they're not more meaningful. They're just filled with more expensive opiates, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I understand as well why they were kind of living the way that they were living, kind of like live fast, die young concept. It makes sense because obviously how bleak, like you said, their current situation was. So, and there was even like a couple of montages of different characters of why they were doing what they were doing, and it's still related to mostly the whole, the whole way of living when it comes to live fast, die young. So,
I just think the ending should have driven that point home.
yeah.
That if you rise above your baser nature and look beyond the today, right, and your needs today, there actually are ways to do this. And that is I think one of the weaknesses in the world building in this is that it's never quite explained why things are so bad, right? Like why can people not organize, right? Like they talk about things like, oh, they try to unionize at this one workplace, and that is why Richards is blacklisted, and that is definitely something that goes towards explaining it. But all of society seems to be completely resigned to this permanent decay. And the book goes into a little bit more detail on this, where it mentions what's going on in other parts of the world. And this movie does a little bit too. But this whole idea of it's not clear to me why the government's control is so complete. Because so much of it, like it seems to be so based on just manipulating people's psychology and getting them to surrender their autonomy voluntarily through things like freebie and the games and all of that. And to me, the masses realizing that they can in fact do something else. That, like, to me, like, that's the perfect ending. That is how you do this. And I've not finished the book yet. I don't know how that ends, but it seems to me like that is the point the movie should be. Like, if the movie is supposed to make a point, which dystopian science fiction is kind of supposed to, it's supposed to say something about the human condition, and it's supposed to say something about, maybe, or at least hint at solutions in most cases. And here the solution is to stop listening to the people who are lying to you. And the ending does not really reflect this. Like, it's just like an uprising.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not like I just think that is how you would end that story.
You know, I get that, and I agree because before I did enjoy the ending, but yours it just has more depth to it and is more. I think it would have more modern relevancy. So yeah, I do agree with definitely what you're saying. Damn, you made me look at the ending differently now.
And I don't even think it's hard to shoot. Like,
Yeah.
just show us, like, establish a couple of characters who are like the mom, right? I remember. I think the Mrs. Parakis. I think she dies in a shootout, right? So maybe she's not the best candidate, but just have somebody who've been watching throughout the entire movie be fully into this game and into the propaganda, and have the last scene be them turning off the TV and going outside.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, this is actually like a strong ending, and one that would have made people kind of sit in the theater as the lights come on and say, "Yeah, I kind of see myself in this person now. I'm gonna turn off the phone just for an hour." If that's, like, first of all, this is like a science fiction blockbuster action spectacle, right? Like, this is the kind of movie that has to make $250 million. Like, this has to be a crowd pleaser in some way, and the trailer entirely sells it on the action. But I think you can weave that into the action, and you can have Richards die in some spectacular fashion. And that does not defeat the network, because you can't defeat the network. You can't kill all of them. It's not like, if you kill Killian, that just means somebody else gets a promotion. The system cannot be defeated in this way. The way you defeat the system is to stop cooperating. And I'm kind of starting to sound like some kind of revolutionary here, but it's like, that's kind of what it is, right? At least within the logic of this movie, and this is kind of the point it's building towards. And the reason I was underwhelmed by it is that it builds towards that point, and then it doesn't make it. And then it turns into like a platitude of rise up against the system and whatever, and resist the man and whatever, but through violence, right? The movie ends on a riot.
But to be fair, it does stay consistent with that. So I kind of do see why they ended it hyper violent because throughout it is hyper violent and grim. So by the way, I agree with your point of how it should have ended. I agree with that, but I'm just saying, although it still follows the whole hyper violent theme and the whole hyper violent. It started off violent and it ends off violent.
Yeah, exactly. I just think the theme of people wallowing in their animal instincts is so strong, because it
Mm,
happens all over the place, right? Like there's vice everywhere in this world, right? Like, you can't turn a corner and not see something seedy. And the people who are elevated above this, like, there was this thing, like I made the mistake I made was to start reading the book before our conversation. Does Bradley, right? Like, the guy with his sister. He in the book, at least, he talks about something about how, when he was in a gang as a child, he stole a library card from somebody with a nice job, and his gang took turns sneaking into the library to educate themselves. I don't
mm,
think that's in this movie, right?
no.
And it's like, he's like, the tools are there, and he talks about how he learned about things like pollution from books, but these were not taught in school. He had to commit a crime by stealing a library card and, like, stealing a suit so he looks nice, like he looks rich, and that is how he got into the library, and that's where he got an education.
Mm, yeah.
That's a really poignant thing, right? Because
Mm,
it's like the tools are there. Like, the government can't hide all information from you. It can only make you not know where to look, kind
yeah.
of thing. And this entire idea, like, even though that particular part did not make it into the movie, this idea is everywhere, right? Like, this idea is that we are being distracted, and that kind of makes it ironic that the movie is distracting us from this message by showing us the chases and explosions, because almost all of the action sequences are added to the movie and were not in the book. The book is very much just Richard's hiding, like this whole thing when he disguises himself as a priest, and takes the bus and all of that. That's basically the book. and he just witnesses things and reflects on things, and he talks about how he plans his next steps and whatever. There's some action, but not a lot. And all of the big chases and fight scenes and all of that were added to this movie. And it's kind of ironic that it's adding the cheap thrills to a movie in which the system oppresses people by providing them with cheap thrills that appeal to our baser nature, and kind of hides the way in which people can rise above that level. And once they do, they become immune to the system, right? Like there are all these people, right? Like Bradley, like Molly, like Elton. All of these characters are free, right? They are not oppressed. There's not like the only reason they are killed is because they helped Richards. Like the government, like there's not like stormtroopers at every corner looking for people who are reading. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? Like this is a world in which people are enslaving themselves.
Mm.
Right? And to me, that seems like the entire point of the story.
Yeah, that is actually the entire point of the story. That's actually a good thing that you point out. They are enslaving themselves. It links back to obviously the opinion, the point that we made back in the day, how everyone's unison, the haves and the have-nots, and obviously the have-nots are the ones that's actually, even though they are working in unison with the haves, but they are the ones that are suffering even more because, like you said, they are enslaving themselves by what they're doing.
But it's everybody. It's rich people
Mm.
too. Like one thing about Amelia, right, the woman who he kidnaps, and in the car, there's this whole thing about how she's. I think that sequence is a little bit mixed, but and in the book it's much longer. They spend much more time in the car, and he really gets through to her. And there's some stuff in here that's not so great, like this whole thing about your scarf cost more than my child's flu medicine. Justify yourself, and that one
Mm.
is a little bit like we live in a society kind of thing that it's not really helpful. Like the fact that some people can afford scarves does not mean we cannot provide medicine to people. You know what I mean? Like that is not the reason why somebody goes without medical care. And you know that's part of that is that Richards is just looking for things to point out to her. But there are some quite strong parts in there where Amelia says something like, "Stop making me think things. Like stop making me feel bad about my life by confronting me with your life."
Mm.
You know what I mean? And or
Yeah.
like I'm a good person, they're not going to kill me. She is really bought into this just world belief where she has a nice life because she's a good person, and he has a bad life because he's a bad person. And that means the world is fair. And it would be terrible if the world was not fair. So she has to believe it is fair. You know what I mean? And by being exposed to Richard's situation, she is forced to recognize that this is not the case and that she has to rethink her entire perception of reality. And that includes seeing kind of the police and the goons and the network up close when they go after Richards. And she's seeing them in reality as opposed to what they put on screen. So there's all of these things where it's not just the poor people who are being enslaved; it's the rich people too. And the rich people have maybe more means to free themselves, maybe because they have more options, but also not really. Like there's this one thing where like the security guy who brings the money to Sheila, right? He tells Richards, "I'm not allowed to to deliver messages, but I'm gonna do it anyway as a favor to you and out of solidarity. But I'm going to send you receipts so that when you complain, they can't fire me because I just did what you asked me to." You remember that scene? Like
Yeah.
he was ready to help him, but he needed to make sure that they couldn't fire him for it. And that is a very corporate thing, right? That rang very true because he's probably just one complaint away from living in the slums, right?
Mm. Yeah.
And so he knows what the right thing to do is, but he cannot afford to do it most of the time because he has so much to lose.
Mm.
And that I think that is quite insightful. The more financially comfortable you are, the more dependent you are on the person paying your bills
Yeah.
in many ways. So you have more to lose, and therefore you cannot maybe like people always ask, hey, why like if you work for a company or a boss or you work for somebody who's doing bad things, why didn't you just quit? Well, I have a mortgage and my child has medical bills, and you know what I mean. Like once you have a bunch to lose, it becomes very difficult to do the right thing as well.
Yeah.
And I think they did bring like they could have just made every wealthy person in this like a clueless moron, and some people like Amelia kind of are, but then there's others who show a little bit more compassion, a little bit more awareness of kind of how golden their cage is. And I think the movie deserves credit for doing stuff like this, where it's not simply like not everybody is a caricature, and this also is reflected when Elton has pity for his mom. He does not hate his mom for having been having succumbed to the brain rot, right? Like he said that he's lost his mom, and we talked about that. But point is, she could have just been a villain, and he could have just hated her, but he isn't. He said that he lost her, and that I think there are little touches in this movie that elevate it just a little bit.
That's how I think. That's how a lot of people feel as well about kind of like people stuck in their ways mixed with filled with hatred is because they, in a way, they don't hate them. Like you said, it's more so they feel sorry for them.
Just to wrap it all up, any last words about The Running Man?
The Running Man, I'm just gonna straight away give it a. I feel like I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. Just touching 7 out of 10. I had a good experience with this one. It was entertaining, and it gave me. I wouldn't say it gave me more than what I was expecting, but it was a nice surprise because it was. I didn't really see much trailers to this one. I saw like little previews on TikTok and that, so I didn't know that it was actually based on a dystopian world, and I didn't know it was based on a novel at all. So when I was watching, I was like, oh okay, I'm starting to like this even more. Of course, like I said, it wasn't perfect. That's why it got a 7 out of 10. But in terms of what it done, I feel like it delivered. It was a cinema movie. It was a very good, entertaining cinema film, which I would recommend people to go and get. Sorry, not to go and get, to go and watch. And yeah, man, 7 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, I think this is first off, in the first instance, it's a really well made movie. It looks good. It's well acted. It's well shot. It flows well. It's just fun to watch. In addition to that, I think the social commentary is a little bit mixed, where I think it should just have been modernized more so that it's actually relevant, or go all the way back to war. Like this is what things looked like in the 80s or something like that, right? But as it stands, it's kind of a mix. But I think there's enough in here where it's actually above the curve in terms of what it says and how it says it, and the thoughtfulness that went into it. It's just hidden under all the action. So it's a little bit it's a little bit mixed. So overall rating is a 5 out of 7. It's good. There are ways to make it better, especially ending, but it's one of the better movies I've seen this year.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for tuning into today's discussion.
So if you've made it this far and you liked what we've been saying, please tell a friend because the algorithm doesn't like us. And if you hated what we've been saying, please tell an enemy.
All right, guys, you heard it here first. We'll catch you next time. Au revoir.
Bye bye.